button. And I think, oh, are we? No. Ooh, we're not muted anymore. Oh. I'll call to order this District of Clearwater regular council meeting for Tuesday, March 21st at 6:30 p.m. I would like to begin by acknowledging that we are fortunate to be gathering together on the unceded territory of the Símpcwemc people who have been caretakers of this land since time immemorial. Are there any late items to add to the agenda? Seeing none, can I get a motion to adopt the agenda as presented? Moved by Councillor Frizzle, seconded by Councillor McKenzie. Thank you. All those in favor? Item 5, are there any declarations of known conflict of interest or pecuniary interest to be declared? Seeing none, moving on. Adoption of the minutes of council meetings. Minutes of the regular council meeting held March 7th, 2023. There is a PDF of those minutes and there is a recommendation. What is the desire of council on that? Are there any errors or omissions to begin with? Seeing none.
I'll move that.
Moved. Thank you, Councillor McKenzie. Seconded by Councillor Matheson. All those in favor? And that passes. We have 2 items under 10. First one is 10.1, DVP 2022-01 to Clearwater Village Road. There is a report, a letter from owner, and a permit under there. Is anybody speaking to this from staff?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to ask Manager of Planning Services, Alex Krause, to speak to the report.
Thank you.
Yes, good evening, Council. I will just share my screen here.
Alex is coming in very quietly.
Oh, can you hear me better now?
Thank you. Yes, thank you.
Perfect. So I will share my screen if I can figure this out here. There we go. And I'm hoping everyone can see that.
Can, thank you.
Thank you. So this application is requesting a variance to the side and front yard setback of zoning bylaw 133. You'll recall on February 21st, Council authorized issuance of notice of intent to consider this variance approval today. Staff mailed the notice to owners and occupiers of all properties within 100 meters of the subject property, and no responses were received. The owner is hoping to build a detached garage. So this is the subject property located at 952 Clearwater Village Road. There is an existing dwelling on the property, and there was an older accessory building that was encroaching onto the neighbor's property. In fact, it was at least partially across the property line. The current owner removed that building. The property is zoned CR1, country residential, and this zone, like most, requires a 1.5 meter side yard setback and a 6 meter front yard setback where it abuts a road. So the owner is proposing to build a new accessory building, a garage, at roughly the same location as the older previous garage. Due to the irregular shape of the lot and the slope at the back of the property, the owner is requesting to actually build across the property line and at a setback of less than 6 meters from the front. The neighbor has agreed to the encroachment and has granted a new easement agreement. This just zooms in a bit further here. And so this legal document between the two property owners, which the district's not involved in, has all been registered. So essentially the neighbor has consented to this portion of the building being on their property, and it's a legal way of doing that. So council's request, or the request to council, is to reduce the setback on the side to 0 and to reduce the front setback down to 5 meters. Given the limitations of the property and the fact that we have written approval of the neighbor in the form of this newly updated easement, staff do recommend the council approve the requested variance tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Krause. Are there any questions of Mr. Krause on this one for clarification? Yeah, thank you, Mr. Kraus, for your report, and thank you for stating in your report that the neighbor has agreed to this. Makes the discussion much easier. So there is a recommendation, if there are no further questions of staff. If anybody wishes to move it. Thank you. Moved by Councillor Matheson. Do I have a seconder? We'll go with Councillor McKenzie. He hasn't been here in a while. Any further discussion? This is an easy one. I have done a lot of these through the TNRD and through other boards. This is nice when neighbors get together and agree on these things. Mm-hmm. All those in favor? And that one passes. Thank you. Moving on to item 10.2, pages 27 to 38 of your agenda. There is a council report, and is there anybody from staff speaking on this today?
Manager Kraus?
Yes, thank you. I will screen share once again. Here we go. All right, so this application is for a rezoning on a portion of the property located on Norfolk Road. The subject property shown here has access off of Norfolk Road and off of Park Drive, a small piece here at the southern portion of the property. This land was rezoned by council in 2013 to enable at that time a proposed 100 strata lot development. The property is zoned R2 compact residential, and that again was from the 2013 rezoning. And again, that was to enable small lot residential development of single family dwellings and where no manufactured home was permitted. The property is designated urban residential in the official community plan, OCP. And so that designation does support small lot urban density and a variety of housing types. So here we see an ortho photo of the property. The pipeline does run through the property east to west. And the owner is requesting to rezone the northern 15 acres, which is about 6.25 hectares. So a portion of the property shown in yellow here to MHP1, manufactured home park. And he'd like the remainder below the pipeline to remain R2 compact residential, where he intends to subdivide and create stick-built residential homes on smaller lots. So potentially up to 23 lots at the south, accessed from Park Drive. This is the conceptual site plan. Sorry, I'll just a few more things here. This is the conceptual site plan submitted by the owner. I do have to note that it's just conceptual. It can be altered, so this is not the exact layout, but the zoning, if approved by council, would allow a density of up to 17 units per hectare. So the owner is proposing right now around 72 home spaces. Again, this drawing may be adjusted once the final road design and other technical factors get ironed out. So council wouldn't be approving the layout, but rather the proposed use as a manufactured home park for manufactured homes. And you're approving the potential density of up to 17 units per hectare. And the zoning would enable either rental or the sale of manufactured home spaces. And the owner has indicated that they would like to apply for a strata subdivision to create lots that can be sold as strata lots, but he also wishes to have a portion that's held as a rental component, so that it would be rented and not sold as individual units. So he might have a mix there, which the zoning would enable. I would like to bring up the Trails Master Plan, as it does show two trails through the property. One is Trail 7K, which is the pipeline route. On November 15th of last year, council did direct staff to rely on official community plan policy and to accept cash in lieu of park dedication rather than physical land and trails as park. So staff will follow this direction. But I did want to point out as well this Trail 7J, which was at one point intended to connect Warby over to the school. And if this trail was required, that would really impact the number of lots that the developer could get through the property. So there would be some concerns if it was required. So at this stage, staff is not requiring this trail unless we're directed so by council. So to conclude, the proposed zoning is for a manufactured home park. It is fully supported by OCP policy, and staff recommend that the amending bylaw be read a first and second time this evening, and then get authorization to proceed to a public hearing from there. So that is all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kraus. Any questions of Mr. Kraus at this point? This does come up again as under bylaws 17.1 later in the agenda. Go ahead if you have a question. Councillor.
Yes, I'm just curious. You mentioned manufactured homes. Does that include mobile homes as well, or is this the pre-built homes you move in and put on a foundation?
Mm-hmm. So the term is manufactured home, which could be either a Z240 standard factory built, which is commonly or historically referred to as a mobile home, or it can be an A277 manufactured home. So there's two different standards in Canada. So it can either be on blocking if it's a Z240 or on a foundation if it's an A277. But the idea is that these homes would be built in a factory, brought to Clearwater, and set up either on blocking or foundation depending on their specific design.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions at this point? Councillor Sem?
I really appreciate the clarification about the trails. I think you said it was 7J, was that right? The one that would impede?
Correct.
And
yes.
so if council went ahead with this, 7J wouldn't necessarily exist and it would be cash in lieu. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes. So they would have to provide cash in lieu if they were to subdivide, so in lieu of providing park, and staff would not ask for 7J to be dedicated or created.
And based on the layout, and I don't know what borders it, but it seems to me that there would be an option for 7J to potentially work as a rectangle around and then connect to 7K. So it would almost move around the property. Does that make sense?
Yes, there is that potential because it borders another property to the north.
Yeah.
And so it might be able to get through that property. But what we're finding is that most developers don't want to give up land as part of their development if it hurts the number of lots that they get. But conceivably, yes, we can ask for it at another stage if that other lot is developed potentially.
Yeah. I mean, so I do think that because I see the rationale of connecting Warby with the school and how that would work out. And I think to have that densification with a number of lots, especially as we move up Park Drive, having that versatility of some of those trails actually lends to the neighborhood makeup. So often we find in neighborhoods where it's focused just on the development needs of a community as opposed to what the community will eventually need and enjoy. I also note that originally that was going to be a seniors development, like way back.
Not that lot.
No, but the concept there, wasn't it?
Rodsutter's property on
No,
the north?
no. Emerald Estates, when it was first presented from...
Strata 55?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and so we had talked about that and then talked about the trail connectivity to get to hospital, clinic, and all of that. So this particular piece of property has had a storyline. So that's the only thing I raise about the question about how to connect those trails without going through the property, because I think that densification is also important.
Councillor Frizzle.
On that subject of the trails, is that a trail that's been created by people just walking there? It's just
I don't even think there's an actual trail there. I think it was a line of the trails master plan. I also know that 7K actually runs down the pipeline right away.
So that's the pipeline right there.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
That's another one I wanted to ask. Okay.
Further questions? Sorry. Go ahead, Mr. Krause.
Yes, if I may. And I think at one point there was also talk when these properties were potentially going to be developed for commercial. There was some talk about creating a backage road along here. And perhaps there were some ideas of having that connectivity continue through. And that idea has since passed as there's no commercial proposed.
Right, for the lot above the 7J on your picture.
Correct, yes.
Yeah,
And in terms of connectivity, the owner will have internal roads and will want to connect as well. So people could still walk from the manufactured home park, connecting down to the pipeline trail, and then work their way towards the properties on the other side and towards the school.
Right on the bottom left-hand corner of that diagram there. Okay, I see the is that
So this
called
is the pipeline.
is that called a breezeway? Is that what that's called? No.
No, these are walkways here that they're wanting to connect.
Thank you. Further questions? If not, thank you for your report, and we will address this again under 17.1. Thank you.
Thank you.
There are no items under unfinished business or tabled or deferred items. No public or statutory hearings. Mayor's report, TNRD strat planning last week. Lots of phone conversations, and honestly, I can't remember all the things I've done, but I'll write it up for the next one because I should have done it today, but there's so much reading for today that I didn't get around to it. Moving on to council reports. Oh, drop the puck at hockey.
Yes,
Yay, we
you
have a
did.
tournament in town. So much economic buzz. The other one that I did do was I had breakfast at the new Hungry Hiker on Sunday, and the meal was fabulous. I will just leave it at that. Thank you. Councillor Bratton, you're up.
I don't have too much to report. May Day Parade is off and running. I'm helping a little bit with that. Registration's coming in. And I'm on the cemetery committee, and it meets tomorrow.
Thank you. Councillor Frizzle.
I attended the public financial consultation at the North Thompson Sportsplex, along with watching figure skating, which was kind of fun, and had lots of lengthy conversations with residents, and got lots of good input. I think it was very beneficial. I must say I really enjoyed the having the opportunity to watch the figure skaters, and there's so many out there. And congratulations on doing a great job, Councillor Bratton. That was
Yes, very
that was
true.
really well done. That's it.
Okay. Councillor Herrick.
Not much to update over the last couple weeks. Just doing some research and prepping for the housing conference next week. Or next meeting will be there. So it's April 4th, 5th, 6th, I think, something like that. But it's Councillor Sim, Councillor Matheson, and I are going. So it's going to be interesting to have some kind of better sense of where we're going to end up housing provincially, so that we can tailor our local stuff to that. I'm looking forward to it.
Excellent. Thank you. Look forward to all of your reports from that. Councillor McKenzie.
Thank you, Mayor Blackwell. Not much to report from myself either. I spent the better part of the last 2 weeks out in Winnipeg for work. So it's going out there is always a nice reminder when we think we got some bad road surfaces out here. I suggest you go take a drive around downtown Winnipeg and realize that we got it pretty good for what we have here. And that's it for me. Thanks.
And how was the weather?
Just about minus 30, snowy, blowy. I don't want to go back for a while. Yeah, another 3 years.
Don't worry, mosquitoes will start tomorrow. Moving on to Councillor Matheson.
Thank you. The main one I was involved in this week, of course, was the community gathering, and we had about 20 plus people out for it. We had a great free-flowing discussion between members of the public, business owners, the RCMP, fire department. There was a lot of information gathered. The biggest things we've noticed or we're informed about is the fact that we're going to probably lose one of the positions in Highway Patrol here. It's going to be moved down to Kamloops once Michelle retires. And I think that's probably our biggest advocacy right now, that we're going to try and move toward in that direction to try and keep our Highway Patrol unit and increase it. There was talk about the interprovincial ticket system, where people from Alberta are not paying their fines because there's nothing to hold their feet to the fire. And so we're going to be kind of looking at that and trying to figure out why. And again, advocacy. The interesting one that I never really thought about was the closures of the highways and the coroner service and taking so long to get to accident scenes. And the body can't be moved until the coroner gives it the okay, and they have to come out of Kamloops if they can find them. And it's like 4 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours, and it's just leading to all sorts of secondary issues where traffic is piling up, like 150 trucks on the highway, followed by a speed race afterwards, and they finally open the highway. So that is a bit of an issue. At one time, I know when I was in the force before, we had local coroners that were available. They were there practically at the same time as the police got there, and it was all dealt with. But I don't know what's changed or why, but the centralization is slowing things down big time. We've got looking at, what else? At the end of the program, we talked about personal things you can do to kind of take our highways back, record and report, and be willing to go to court. We also addressed the issue about cell phone video footage and using that for evidence. And you cannot drive your vehicle and film the offense while you're doing 80 kilometers, 80 mile an hour down the highway and expect it to be entered into evidence. So you have to give it to the passenger to do the recording and stuff. And we suggested dash cameras that can see front and back, and and again, being willing to go to court, take our highways back. And if you're going to talk the talk, walk the walk. If you're going to complain about traffic conditions and everything else, you shouldn't be the one getting speeding tickets or passing on double solid lines or tailgating. So set an example, talk to neighbors, talk to your kids, all that kind of stuff. So it was, all in all, it was a really interesting meeting. We got a lot of information about stuff that I didn't really consider. One I found really interesting was people that are normally would travel and shop in Kamloops or other communities, 100 Mile House or stuff, are not doing it now. They're ordering on Amazon. Mm-hmm. So not only are we losing out locally, other communities are losing because of this highway issue. And everybody's expressing extreme concern about this summer, and there is a lot of fear and anxiety out there, people in the community, about traveling on the highway.
Sam, do you have a...
I just had a question. I wondered if it was raised, if since the speed limits were raised, which they have been recently, but was there any talk about the fact that had they re-engineered the lines on the road, or did they just keep the lines the same? So some of those passing corners at 100 kilometers are very different, or at 90 kilometers are very different than 100 kilometers.
Yeah, you didn't hear anything at that meeting, but I can...
Not really. It was more of a general conversation about the highways haven't been updated for a long time.
50 years.
And we need more. The big one is we needed more pull-out zones for big trucks. We have pullouts, but big trucks can't get into them. And sometimes there's some contractor issues because the contractors aren't clearing out the snow removal in the winter in a timely fashion that these trucks can actually get into it. There were instances this winter where big trucks had to be towed out of the rest zones because they got stuck in there, which causes other problems. So there's a lot of very interesting information that came out of it. Some we can't really comment on right now. We have to do some background checking and fact checking and stuff. But if that comes to light as being an issue, there's a lot of lobbying involved in here and advocacy. And I made it clear to everybody at the meeting that we are not responsible for the highways. All we can do is advocate for it, change in the thing. And as a valley, I think that's something we really have to start pushing for. But I think the number one thing that we have to push for right now is keeping the Highway Patrol Unit in Clearwater.
Yeah, for sure. To add to that information that I know from my conversations with Minister Fleming, who is responsible, and Mayor Stamer, a couple of things are coming down the road this year in response to this. One that the Ministry of Highways is looking at seriously is turning the twisties, both north of Heffley and through sections closer to us, so south of Little Fort, back into variable speed zones. With variable speed signs. The other thing is completion of centerline rumble strips. They are in a lot of places, but they're not everywhere, to wake people up that they're crossing the center line, and that there is actually a new passing lane supposedly starting construction this spring just south of Barrier. But yes, it was expressed to him, a lot of the comments. About 80% of the stuff that was covered in this meeting that Councillor Matheson hosted was covered at some level in the discussions with the ministry, but having the evidence or the anecdotal stories to back it up is incredibly useful. And then all the other tips, as you mentioned, about highway safety, cams, what not to do, when you're driving. There was videos passed to me that I couldn't use because of the fact that the people were speeding in order to get it. So, and it was apparent on the video. But yeah, there's still lots to do on this, and we will continue to push that forward. Councillor Matheson, do you have more?
That's about it. That's the main thing for 2 weeks.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Sim.
And thank you very much, Councillor Matheson. I thought that there was some really thoughtful contributions on CBC and then pulling that together. So congratulations. I also want to mention that you were fantastic at the skating, concert. I think you were in the lights, weren't you? Doing the filming? You were videoing at the skating concert. Oh, okay. Yeah. Anyway, that was good. So the skating concert, as mentioned, it was really terrific. Councillor Bratton really did do a marvelous job, attended the budget that was held that same night, so good to get some feedback there. Also went to the Chamber of Commerce. They've had a few applicants to their new part-time position. They're looking at their gala banquet to be held in October. They're also looking at their website, and they're doing some really interesting initiatives with their strategic plan. So it's lots of good energy there. Along with the mayor, I attended the local health planning table, and that was an opportunity to meet with people from all over our region, the physicians as well as the team at the IH, and I believe that Mayor Blackwell had also met with the new Kathy Dual, and so maybe you want to speak to that.
Kathy Dual is the new Carl, the new Lisa, rural and remote care section. So she looks
They're the
after
big wigs.
She looks after basically all the hospitals in our regional district, other than Barrier, or towns and hospitals other than Barrier and Royal Inland. So yes, Lillooet's everywhere. So it's a very sharp person. Comes with excellent recommendations from people I know inside the system as well.
So it was an excellent meeting, and just great to get a bit of a pulse on some of the recruitment and retention needs, definitely speaking to the needs of the nurses that are still a big requirement. With seeing some of the easing of the housing pressures within town, that should probably lend there. IH had rented a house, and that's going really, really well. They're seeing sort of some changes with their contracting nurses, so those positions are available. And then just some discussions about some potential partnerships about how we can train up young students looking for a next career and how to make that opportunity available to them in Clearwater. So a really proactive meetings. Wanted to share that. Also had the opportunity to attend the speech competition at Raft River. They were outstanding. If any of those kids are going to run for council, like, they are just going to vote us all out, because they were so good. And a big shout out to your daughter, Councillor Mackenzie. She was so nervous but so enthusiastic, and they were all just well prepared. So that was just a real pleasure. Hospital Auxiliary went to their planning meeting. Their garden party is for May the 6th. And of course the hockey banquet on Saturday night, which has kicked off 4 days of amazing hockey, especially for the local teams. I want to thank the curling club for opening up the lounge. That's created a really nice social opportunity. So and I think I drove by the gateway today, and their patio was packed on the way here. Just a little sort of number game is, it looked like they probably booked about 50 rooms for 4 nights at an average cost of $175. That brought in, just for hotel rooms, $35,000. And then the MRDT would bring in about $700. So when we look at some of those tourism dollars, that's a big impact. That doesn't include all the lineups that have been at Bilo and all the other different pathways. Leanne Culp, who is our tournament coordinator, she was amazing. She made so many good things happen. The tournament packages were outstanding. For every partnership we've got with Tourism Wells Grey and sort of that coordinator position for tournaments, it's well worth it. And this is just one example of it. So just wanted to share that. Thanks.
Excellent, thanks. Yeah, the economic impact of tournaments in a season, now that Trans Mountain pipeline workers are beginning to leave town, can't overstate that as much, especially in the winter season. That's excellent money. And as a hockey parent yourself, how much money do you save by not having to leave town to go to a tournament?
Well, you just put it all back in 50-50. So you know you're losing it one way or another. But yeah, it certainly is, and there's just a really great energy, and it's sort of the end of the season, and the team at the arena has been just stellar as well. So lots of good compliments.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Yeah, good news on that. Moving on, you have the CAO's report in your package. Any questions on that one or comments from the CAO? A lot of work there. Councillor Frizzle, go ahead.
I just wanted to say it's really nice to see those potholes getting filled. Yes, I saw that was in the gray area here, and it's nice, and that the weight restrictions are up. I saw that when I drove in the other day. I went, whoa, it's spring. So yeah, just wanted to mention that.
Further, Councillor Sim?
Yeah, I really appreciated the time and work that went into the liaison appointments and the upcoming committee meetings. I thought that was really helpful. There was a few new working groups, and I wondered if there was if you wanted to talk about how you saw that playing out or what you thought next steps were with that.
The list of working groups that we have were generated based on the strategic priorities of the previous strategic plan. We had some discussions. I can only speak for June 28th on forward, June 20th, 2021, which when I started the position, I don't know what happened before, but I can speak from that point on. Recruitment and retention first started out as a committee, and that changed to a working group because council wanted to have some of those discussions without the requirement for agendas, etc. So that was changed to a business meetings. Working groups are business meeting. Committees, select or standing committees are a very different animal, requires posting, requires agendas, requires minutes, requires different things.
And full public attendance is part of that?
Full public attendance is a requirement.
Is a requirement,
from the community
but
charter.
most of these working groups also include members of the public as well.
They do.
Okay, thank
Yes.
you.
Forestry initiatives. So in the past, it was forestry working group. We have not had a meeting for some time now. There have been upwards of 3 past members of the working group expressing an interest in having a group, but we need to do something about that, probably on April 4th, figure out what council wants to do in terms of the working group for forestry and whether or not it aligns with council's current direction. Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Working Group was a decision of council to create from the Park, Recreation, Social Development Standing Committee. Emergency Management Working Group, that was created through the bylaw that the council passed to update the District of Clearwater Emergency Response Bylaw. The plan is going to come forward. The plan has been drafted for some time and on our desk. It's about 150 pages of reading material. A lot of it is not dense reading stuff about what to do in events, but it includes a lot of checklists so that we know what to do and implement them. That is likely coming forward either April 4th or the second meeting in April. The Housing Growth Working Group, there was a strong interest from council to look at housing as a priority when I started. And so we proposed creating a housing group to look at a couple of things in focus. That included over 6 bylaws that touches on development, which is listed in the CAO's report, and looking for ways to identify potential conflicts between those bylaws and streamline. And also to look at ways to incentivize housing development in Clearwater, including the additional 1% of MRDT available that the district could explore in the future and laying that foundation early. Infrastructure Planning and Development Working Group. We have a Community and Economic Development and Infrastructure Standing Committee. Underneath that standing committee, the Infrastructure Planning and Development Working Group could be struck at any time to look at specific issues. For example, if we were to bring forward a new integrated sewer or stormwater plan, as an example, and council thought it was appropriate to do a deeper dive, a select group of that standing committee can work with the CAO and the Director of Operation to look at that plan in detail and report back to the committee, similar to how the DEI working group is currently structured. Council Strategic Plan Working Group, again, that was struck because when I started the position, we had over 111 items as priority to move forward with, and council wanted an opportunity to focus on how does that align with the strategic plan. We've never struck that committee, or working group, sorry, and we've never activated that. Finance and audit. In the past, we had a finance and audit committee. Now we have a government operations committee, which handles finance and audit activities. But if council wanted to look at something specific related to audit or finance, a working group could be a way to do that. Public policy. We have a number of policy bylaws, contracts, etc., outstanding and require work. That was reflected in our management letter, as an example, as a priority for the District of Clearwater. And the approach we've taken is tabling any reports directly to council. We've never struck the policy working group, but that's up to council to consider. Major community events working group. In the past, discussions around signature community events was important to council, and we thought having a working group focused on that was an opportunity to have people in the community identify potentially up 4 to 6 signature events that the District of Clearwater could facilitate to occur in the community. And now we have accessibility committee/working group. Again, this is generated from a new legislative requirement from the province. A report is going to come forward to council in April about the specific requirements from the province and seeking direction. I believe one of the requirements the province legislated is to have an accessibility committee, a mechanism for people in the community to provide feedback directly to the government, and have a plan in place for accessibility. That would require funding, which is why we put in the financial plan upwards of $50,000 to facilitate that. If we don't do that now, and later on council decides to move forward with a third party to support the development of a plan, we will have to amend the budget in order to do that. So we don't have to spend it if it's budgeted, but if it's not budgeted, we have to change the budget in order to spend it.
Further questions?
No, just an appreciation for that, and just looking forward to what that all translates to. I am also hoping with the this council schedule and the council committee structures is just to have a look at those at another meeting at another time in the future. Just noting that really most of the other committees, ECDEV, Parks and Recs, they really don't kick in until April and are in the second part of the year. So to have 2 council people share that in 6-month rotations at this point in time doesn't make sense. So looking at it to either we weave the meetings a little bit differently because we're quite heavy on the government operations that takes us, as you know, Councillor Frizzle, and maybe is there a way to sort of weave that because we were down to those 3 committee structures, but maybe let's look at that and how we can get our teeth into it for a year round as opposed to just.
Thank you. Councillor Herring.
Yeah, and just a side note, that really exciting about that emergency management working group. I'd love to be involved in that. I unfortunately won't be here on the 4th, but if it's later in that month, I'd love to be part of that discussion.
My understanding of the next one with the Upper Clearwater Valley thing on April 4th is they're now doodle poll out, and it may go April 3rd or sooner because there's a lot of people with conflict. So I don't know what the schedule for your. Are you gone all that week? Is that the deal?
I keep my phone that week for sure.
Okay, thank you. Any further comments or questions on any of the reports? There's also Clearwater stats, liaison assignments, and the council schedule on there. Yes, I like this. Thank you for fleshing this out. I really do look forward to the working group because it can, listening to the discussion about committees and Kamloops today, about all the various levels of committee, they call their working groups, what is it? Engagement committees. But it's essentially the same idea. And the forestry working group that we've had for years and many of these other groups have been an excellent source of information. But it also allows us to call them when needed. In the past, we've done them as a schedule, but that became too heavy for especially industry. But yes, we do every once in a while need to get quote unquote the band back together on these things. And definitely a few of them with policy and accessibility and things like that. We will probably have to make it a schedule. Thank you for that. Moving on to new business, staff reports. TNRD adult education allocation. And I believe Ms. Glasson is speaking to that.
So on your report on page 50 and 51, after review of the adult education reserve and the items that we've received for the adult education, we received $50,000 from the Thompson-Nicola Regional District, and we received $33,500. Sorry, I think I got it, that one.
Yeah, 50 from TMX.
And 50,000 from the TMX and 33,500 from TNRD. However, the 50,000 was allocated to reserve, and the 33,500 was allocated to the bank account, but not to the reserve. So essentially, staff has followed the resolution provided to the T. And the 33,500 is not in a reserve, it's sitting in our surplus accounts. So was it the intention of council to put that 33,500 in a reserve? And if so, if you could review that recommendation.
Thank you. Questions, Councillor Sim?
I was just going to move the recommendation. It seems like it's a housekeeping and exactly as intended.
Thank you. That was going to be my comment after your question, but thank you for moving the recommendation. Seconder, Councillor Frizzle. Any further comments or questions? All those in favor? And that passes. Thank you. Moving on to item 16.2, defining shovel-ready projects, review of cost estimate classification. Quite a lengthy report there. I'm sure Mr. Thomas is going to want to speak to this.
Yes, this report is basically also housekeeping, but on a higher level in the sense of it has implications for district budgeting, district financing, grant application processes, and our possibility of increasing our chances of success. When I started with the district in 21, we had applied for a sewer expansion grant for Dutch Lake subdivision. We were unsuccessful. In 2022, we applied for 2 grants for the siphon replacement, and both of those were unsuccessful. And throughout that process, we did reach out to the funding agencies and ask for feedback as to how we could improve our applications in the future. The sewer expansion project, one of the feedback we received was we needed to factor in our water conservation efforts. I can't remember the name of that report off the top of my head.
Yeah, we had to have a up-to-date water conservation plan.
That's correct, because the original plan was, I believe, from 2012. This time around for the siphon project, the response was concerns primarily about our financial stability in the context of if one of those projects was to go sideways, how would we afford the cost overruns as a municipality? And the cost overruns using a Class D estimate could range between, one sec here,
19 million. I think is what your report says.
between 20 and 30% of the original project cost. And so what I took away from that meeting with the federal government was the district may find it in its interest to define shovel ready, build a budget for the project at a sufficiently high level where you have assurance that you've factored in a lot of risk, you factored in the scope of work, and you've costed this down within a range of 10 to 15% rather than 20 to 30%. The current market for infrastructure development is skyrocketing, and with that large of a variance, our chances of being successful will continue to be challenged, especially when some of the grants we're applying for, the subscriptions are in the tune of 500 million, but the funding pot is 100 million. And so they're going to prioritize projects that have a higher possibility of success with lower financial risk. And so the purpose of this report is to define what shovel-ready means for the District of Clearwater and to consider the following. Our tangible capital asset requirements. The project has been initiated by the District of Clearwater. Not all projects will be initiated by council per se, but all projects will be funded by council through the financial plan. Projects over $100,000 is awarded by council. That's in the purchasing bylaw, purchasing policy. The project plan should be developed to a cost estimate of Class B or higher, which increases our level of financial assurance. And that the plan, once developed, should not be considered shovel-ready if it's more than 3 years because of the changes in the market. Now, updating a plan that is 3 years old or more, Class B to a Class A, and then to issue for construction drawing is a lot less expensive than developing it from a Class D estimate, because a Class D is really a conceptual stage of the project.
Okay, any questions on that? My understanding on the at least the Lance grant that we talked about, it was good. I mean, there's a lot of thought that what we put forward was worthy. It just was that we did not have the detail that was required to, as you stated, and give confidence that we could financially pull it off if things went sideways. Councillor Herring, Councillor Frizzle after.
So by having a Class B estimate, that's going to increase the amount of time we put into each one of these plans, correct? So is that going to have an impact on how many shovel-ready projects we can have going? Because what I'm concerned about is, you know, we're kind of chasing the federal and provincial dollars, so their yearly priorities are going to shift. So I think to now, the sort of concept has been just have a whole bunch of these ready so that when a trails grant comes up, we have a trails project. When a hospital grant comes up, we have a hospital, you know, like all of that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. Whereas if we go to Class B, are we going to have a smaller list and thereby have less ability to be flexible when the federal provincial priorities come out?
Mm-hmm. I'm not sure you'd have less ability to be ready. In the past, from my observations, and I stand to be corrected, the grants will come out. We will then develop those Class D estimates, apply for the grant, and if we're successful, move forward with developing C, B, A issue for construction, all in 1 year. And that puts, there are trade-offs to that. It puts the project forward on an aggressive timeline. It has impacts for organizational processes in other areas and for capacity. With this model, council can systematically move forward with projects it has already adopted in a plan, rather than searching for new projects. Council has already said the infrastructure projects are important. Infrastructure is being identified as a priority provincially and regionally, and to build a portfolio of projects that is ready for funding, and it makes it easier for them to say yes than for them to ask questions. Well, what if this? How would you address it?
Okay, supplementary on that? Okay, thank you, Councillor Frizzle.
I think you've sort of asked what I was going to ask, but I also have all our applications gone in as a Class D in the past.
To my understanding,
So
yes.
they have. So we have to up our game, is basically what we're saying.
Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Sim.
Yeah, but I think if we look at an average, I think that over the past few years, we had an 80% success, as demonstrated in 111 staff items. It seems to me that it's these higher infrastructure ones that have been those two. I have to concur with Councillor Herring is that, you know, the nature of the government beast is that it is the dog chasing the tail and it's miserable. and I appreciate that. And I almost wonder as if we have to look at some sort of a reserve for that staffing component when we are successful, because governments can call elections and there's money on the table and you have to pivot at a moment's notice. To be prescriptive with it, I'm concerned that we lose a little bit of our flexibility. I do like the fact that for those major infrastructure things that we apply that attention. So for the siphon, which is exceptionally important to our community, some of those larger infrastructure, we do have that time and attention. I wouldn't want this same prescription to be had for all opportunities, though, because I think we just have to remain flexible.
Comments, Mr. Thomas, on that?
Yes, I don't see. Maybe I'm not understanding. I'm not sure how developing a shovel-ready project to a Class B would impact the district's ability to be flexible, because the district will still have the option of deciding which project to put forward to the province or the grant funding agency for consideration.
Okay. Just for my clarification, probably for Councillor Sims. So going to a Class B or higher, what does, for example, what would the expense level be? What are we talking about as far as how far we go from a concept to almost an engineering drawing? Like, where are we at?
You want to expand on that?
The guy that's done this, so thank you. Go ahead, Chad. Mr. Carmichael, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, you're on the right track. A Class B estimate would go with a detailed design. So it would be almost tender ready, I suppose, when you do a Class B estimate.
So in cost, in comparable cost, I mean, obviously design is a portion of cost of a project, but a basic concept versus almost an engineering drawing, how much percentage-wise, roughly, in your experience, where are we kind of going with that?
I think we'd probably be around 30 to 40% of the engineering budget to get up to that stage.
Okay, thank you. And then the other, just a comment, having watched grants for the last 12 years, since the dawn
14.
of time. Yes. Councillor Sim and I are now seasoned members of the political spectrum now after 4 terms. We started out with 50-cent grants, then went to 60, then to 80, and what is it, 83, and now 100% grants. A lot has changed in the spectrum of what government grants were, and a lot of that had to do with the federal and provincial government understanding that small communities did not have matching funds. And when I say those percentages, the remaining percentage is what the community would provide. So an 83% grant from the government would mean we still had to provide 17% as part of our contribution to it. Large infrastructure with the province and the feds used to be 33, 33, and 33, or 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. So transit and stuff in Vancouver is quite often still that way. I'm wondering if the discussion needs to be had with the higher levels of government. If we go back to advocating for a maybe lower percentage, so that we maybe contribute more, so that more groups or communities are able to access at least some portion of this, instead of having these grants oversubscribed 5, 6, 8, 10 to 1, which seems to be the trend right now, which is another reason that we're losing out just to the sheer volume of people applying for grants. Mr. Thomas, do you have a comment?
Going to, I believe, Councillor Sims' comment earlier, Councillor can certainly add a dollar value as a threshold for where we move forward with a Class B estimate. I strongly recommend that the larger the infrastructure project, the greater the risk, the greater the contingency, and the greater the financial responsibility for cost overruns. So perhaps $500,000 or $1,800,000. It's up to council.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Herring, then Councillor Sim.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good idea, just having that split, because I think that addresses what I was talking about, where you kind of end up with we still have a long list of projects that are possible that we can take to the next step if we need. But yeah, I think in the case of infrastructure, for sure, if we can be further down that road, we're going to be more successful. I just think of the smaller grants, things like that. If we can kind of keep that from having to go to Class B, I think that's going to save you guys from having to do a bunch of work on projects that may go nowhere, because there may never be a grant for some of those things, right?
Councillor Sim, did you have further?
Yeah, I just also want to clarify is the fact that if there was some concern over our finances for any potential overrun, it doesn't matter how good our plan is, we still don't necessarily have that ability, or do we? In which case, should we be factoring in some discussions about doing a borrowing, or how we use this 1.5 million, or how do we address the fact that, you know, we need to have some money in reserve that would make us attractive? Because that is something we just don't have regardless of our planning.
A great point on, if I may, Mayor, through you. Great point on the financial piece. At the core of that discussion with the grant funding agency was not whether or not we were financially stable as a municipality, but because of the large variance, 20 to 30%, 20 is the minimum percentage, 30 is the maximum. Because of that variance, it showed them that we had a lot of planning to do. If they were to award the grant, we had a lot of planning to do and variables to consider, and that increased our risk profile to the grant management. And so they were concerned about that. So the more refined our planning is, the more accurate council would know what the budget is, and council would be able to either finance it through debt or other mechanism, and communicate that to the grant agencies.
So supplemental, and just to confirm, so if we go to the site project, if I remember correctly, when we first made that application, because we've done it twice now, the cost was 1.6 million. And in a 2-year time, it's now up to 2.2 because of the way that the world has gone. No?
Both applications were made at the 2.2 million.
Oh, I misunderstood. So when we got the quote in our infrastructure master plan, it was the 1.6, but we had to move to the 2.2. So even with the detailed plan, that pricing would still be flexible. Am I understanding that right? So even if we had the siphon perfectly designed, we could still white out the 2.2 if it's now gone to 2.6.
Yes, sort of. So the 2.2 is an estimate based on Class D, which says your price could change 20 to 30%.
Okay, thank you.
And
Good.
as you refine the planning, for example, Park Drive, 1.3 million, the issues of the utilities in the way at that intersection, realignment that needed to be done, had the potential of jeopardizing the entire project in 2021. And had we moved further along, some of those items could have been resolved in the planning stage and not in the construction stage.
Good. Thank you very much, I think.
Yeah, and just a clarification on the actual siphon project, which is used as an example here. The $1.6 million project and the 2.2 were actually different plans. The 1.6 had a different route than the 2.2. Is that correct?
That is correct. The initial discussion when the infrastructure master plan was being developed was to replace the siphon in the current location, and that was estimated at 1.6. Following a review of the current location and the challenges associated with Public Works maintaining it should a critical failure occur, the decision was made to do a realignment, which brought the price up to 2.2. But that 2.2, with further refinement and planning, will likely increase. And that unknown is what the funding agency was concerned about.
Yes, and the change in plan, to paraphrase, it was to make that item serviceable essentially, and replacing it in the current place, which is part of the problem that we have with it right now, is it's not easily serviceable without specially trained people, equipment, et cetera, et cetera. So that was part of the change, not inflation. I just wanted to make that clear. Any further comments? If not, there is a recommendation.
The recommendation sounds much smarter than I am ever going to be, so I'm not too sure what it exactly means. and I'm nervous about moving it. Just not because I don't believe it's good intent, but I don't know. Does anybody else struggle with the wording, or is everybody else fine?
Councillor Herring?
I'm good with the wording. I'm not sure how we incorporate that cost threshold you were mentioning with infrastructure projects. That might be the one addition in here that's not there, but I understand the wording of this sort of definition of shovel-ready projects, and I'm prepared to move that as long as we have the caveat of some kind of price cap in there. I don't know what you guys feel the price cap should be, or
Mr. Prime?
Yes. So my recommendation for council would be that council establish the definition of shovel-ready projects to mean projects over a price threshold council would like to set that meet the following criteria, and the rest would remain the same. And I believe that would be acceptable wording. So,
Thank you. Councillor Sim?
Yeah,
further?
however, it would mean maybe a discussion about the threshold we're happy with. I don't know if we're able to have that now, or if perhaps we should contemplate it and maybe have a further discussion with Ms. Klassen, or do you feel that that's necessary, Ms. Klassen?
Or Mr. Thomas?
Yeah, well,
Through Mr. Thomas, do you have a comment?
Ms. Klassen, feel free.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. I'm not exactly sure, like, when you move down this process of being shovel-ready at a Class B, it's going to cost us a little bit more to begin with, and that may not be the amount that is allowed to be claimed if you get 100% grant for it. However, we may get the grant. So that's a little bit of risk. So we do our work up front, and potentially score well and get the grant, reduce the risk for the grantor, and that is what we want. But what is the exact amount? I mean, $500,000 for sure. But we're a small community, so maybe you want to bring the threshold down.
So, and you, just to clarify, you bring up actually a very important point in there, that work that we do ahead of the grant, receiving the grant, is actually not covered in the grant.
Often it's not. It depends on the granting organization.
For planning and stuff.
Yeah.
I think that if a $500,000 threshold, I mean, most things, if we realistically look at the projects that we've done, the ability to take a project under $500,000, borrow, find other pots of funding within the District of Clearwater, surplus, etc., reserves, if they qualify to solve a problem, you'd have to go a hell of a lot in the hole. Over 20% above budget would be $100,000. Those kind of numbers I think we could manage. Anything above that, I kind of go, that's where I would question it. So I actually do like the $500,000 number. Councillor Sim.
so with that, I'm reading here that it's the recommendation that the council establish the definition of shovel-ready projects. But is that really what we're needing to do here, is to establish a definition? Or are we looking to establish 3 projects that would be, we would move to shovel-ready with the criteria as listed in the motion?
Go ahead, Mr. Thomas.
We're hoping to have a definition because it allows us to communicate differently with our engineers, with planning staff, adjust our internal operations to figure out how do we get this project ready for a potential grant. On an annual basis, council gets to decide which project stays in the capital plan for implementation.
Thank you. Further questions, comments? This I mean, this obviously is a big subject. We can always table if you want further insight, but that's got to be a decision of council. I'm actually okay going ahead. I see the logic behind this, and you know, a definition of shovel ready to a Class B or higher standard, no older than 3 years, that can be added to the district financial plan. This isn't going to cover everything, because we're still going to have projects that come up that we need to deal with, or items that will come up 1 year as an urgent thing, maybe not an emergency thing, but an urgent thing, or an opportunity. And there's still going to be projects that will not be covered in the scope of this, to the whim of federal or provincial governments. But I think there's going to be core infrastructure projects that definitely fall in this definition or this idea that we do need to plan for. Siphon being one, sewer expansion being another one, roads, if we ever see another roads grant come up, which I really doubt we will. But there are certain projects that getting to that Class B with less risk, having that definition there is great. But it's still not going to cover everything. It's just no way that it can cover every potentiality that we have coming forward. Further questions or comments? Councilor?
I'd like to move the recommendation with the amended price minimum of $500,000. Yeah, like, sorry, the way it was worded. You know, that with $500,000 or above, you have to have the Class B estimate.
Okay. Do I have a seconder on that? I'll second it. Thank you. Further discussion? Councillor Sim.
Yeah, I love where this is going. It's not landing 100% with me, but I see that it's moving okay with the table. I'm going to vote against it because I also worry that it may hamstring us. I just wanted to see a little more flexibility in it. It's just not where I'm comfortable voting for it right now.
Thank you for your comments. Further comments? If not, all those in favor? Okay. Opposed? Noted. Thank you. Councillor Sim noted opposed. Item 16.3, business walk update. There's staff report there on pages 87 to 103. A lot of detail in there. Do we have comments from staff? Ms. Bystead online, I believe.
I'd like to invite Ms. Bystead to present.
Thank you. Go ahead whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me okay tonight?
Yes, we can hear and see you today. Thank you.
Oh, okay. So what you have before you is the summary of the business walk that was that we did last October. There was 6 of us that went out into the community talking to 40 of our local businesses divided up between the 3 commercial areas of Clearwater. I think that the business walk report itself provides all of the feedback and charts all of the responses. So I'll leave that for a moment in case there are any questions. I wanted to talk a little bit about how we use the results from the business walk. And I have provided a couple examples on the second page of the report, where we sort of look at, you know, we were able to talk to the businesses, and particularly the businesses in Strawberry Flats, who brought up questions and concerns regarding the signage, wanting to have better signage so that people knew that there was some businesses in a commercial area in their area. So because of those conversations and the information in our economic development strategy, we were able to access funding for the Clearwater wayfinding and signage. Similar thing with the business retention and expansion, which we had gone after before. So we had the funding in place but prior to the business walk, but the information from the business walk certainly complemented the work from both the grant and from the strategy. So we've been able to use the information from the business walk, tie it into both the priorities within the strategy and what's been happening within the services that we can provide to the community. So does anyone have any questions regarding the report itself?
Questions of Ms. Bystead on the report? Go ahead, Councillor Sim.
No, it was a really good report and lots of great questions and certainly exceptional feedback. One of the things that struck out in the feedback was business who was saying that they wanted some assistance with more of an online presence and how to access that. And that was actually a topic that was raised at the chamber. So this is such a good document that can be maybe supported by the Chamber of Commerce, and how that could be a direct action item for membership advantage or something. So this is wonderful to be able to share.
Thank you for
Yeah,
those.
no,
Go ahead.
just to follow up to that, absolutely. And I think that the partners that we had working with us on the business walk from Community Futures, particularly because they frequently provide that that type of training, and so being able to have them available, they could hear on the ground those responses from the businesses, is a great opportunity for us to work with both the Community Futures and the Chamber to bring specifically those programs that the businesses have requested.
Yes, excellent. Councillor Frizzle has a question.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this report. There's lots of information there. But one thing, you say you're going to be doing another business walk, and have you considered, and can you even do a home-based business walk? Because there's a lot of home-based businesses in town, and it would be really good to hear from them as well, I think.
It absolutely would. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. Yep.
I unfortunately I can't see everybody on the screen right now, so it's a little hard to follow. The one of the things that we'd like to build onto is this year, because we were laying that foundation, it was very much we wanted to have those in-person discussions. There is the possibility of having an online function where we can provide the ability for businesses to log in, so we can ensure that they're bona fide local communities, you know, from different industries, and give them that opportunity to provide an online survey in addition to the in-person one. So it wouldn't replace, we'll still do an in-person one, but definitely looking at other ways to expand our responses.
Thank you. Any further questions, comments? Yeah, I would like to thank you for the report as well. I mean, information is power, especially in this. If we know what we're talking about, I think it feeds into so many things that communities can do. And you're right. I see it, and we talk about infrastructure and things like that. When we have highways up here looking at our intersections with engineers and that sort of thing, having those outside professionals that aren't usually here, which is why I think Community Futures coming and assisting in this was so valuable. And it opens up opportunities for all sorts of people. A new set of eyes on our town. And how things work, I think, is so incredibly valuable. So I thank you for the whole process, and thank you for your report. Any further comments or questions from anybody? If not, thank you. Thank you for your time. Moving on to item 17.1, RZ 2202, zoning amendment bylaw number 270. There is a recommendation. What is the wish of council? And this is in relation to the modular home. Give you all a second. Go ahead.
So mine is more of a process question to clarify. This passing it allows us to take this out to public consultation, receive feedback from neighbors, and then we make a decision on it. So all this is whether or not we're going to consider it later. Am I?
Go ahead, Mr. Kraus.
Yes. Yeah, so tonight is first and second reading, which would authorize staff to do the mail out, to host the public hearing. And so in a future council meeting is when we would have the public hearing, hear all input, and at that point, council could turn it down. Let's say if there's neighborhood concern or you're concerned by it, or you can proceed. So nothing is decided today except that it allows or enables proceeding to public hearing if you so choose. If not, council can deny and end the application tonight.
Thank you. Councillor Sim?
In the spirit of that, I would move the recommendation. I'd really like to hear what our community has to say about this. I mean, it's changing and it's a big thing. I'd like to hear from them. So moving the recommendation.
So are you moving it, or is Bill moving it? Or is Councillor
I can
Harry?
second it. And
Okay.
Bill?
Okay. Moved by Councillor Sim, seconded by Councillor Herring. Further discussion? If none, all those in favor? And that passes. And then I have to read this. Oh no, so this is read and introduced by title only. District of Clearwater bylaw number 270, a bylaw to amend District of Clearwater bylaw number 23. Bylaw number 133. All those in favor? That gets it better. And then the second one, I actually have to read the whole thing out. So there is a second one recommendation as well, which will take us after that to a regular to a public hearing in conjunction with a regular council meeting. What is the desire of council on the second recommendation? Moved by Councillor Frizzle, seconded
Second that.
by Councillor McKenzie. District of Clearwater bylaw number 270, 2023, a bylaw to amend District of Clearwater zoning bylaw number 133, whereas an application number RZ 2202 for the amendment to zoning bylaw number 133 has been made, and whereas the desired changes in uses of land have been considered, and whereas the zoning amendment conforms to the District of Clearwater official community plan, now therefore the Council of the District of Clearwater in open meeting assembles and acts as follows. This bylaw may be cited as the District of Clearwater zoning bylaw number 133, amendment bylaw number 270, 2023. All those in favor? And that passes. Thank you. Give me a half second to get caught up here. Where are we on the clock? 7:44. Okay, we're moving on to Committee of the Whole. Item 18. There is a recommendation that the council enter a Committee of the Whole meeting of Government Operations Standing Committee. Can I get a mover and a seconder on that one? So moved by Councillor Bratton, seconded by Councillor Matheson. All those in favor. And I turn the chair over to Councillor Frizzle, one of my favorite parts of any meeting.
Thank you, Mayor Blackwell. We're going to be moving on to 18.3 for a public engagement report, the financial plan 2023-2027. Ms. Clausen?
Thank you, Chair Frizzle. You have a report in front of you on page 107. The District of Clearwater had 3 public engagements for the budget or financial plan 2023 to 2027. One was held in December, another 2 were held in February. The last financial plan public engagement was held, I guess, a week and a half ago at the skating event. We found that one to be quite successful. We tried different methods, and we have some learnings for next time. So this report basically asks council that we have had sufficient public consultation for the financial plan and makes it clear that that's what we've done. If council feels that they would like us to go further, although we don't have a lot of time, for public engagement, then we might have to do something tomorrow. That's how close we are in our...
Are there any questions?
Just a comment that I just really appreciated all the innovative ways that you reached out, and we saw everything from videos to games to meeting people with where they were going. There was a lot of work put into it, and I want to thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Sim. It takes a team. A lot of different ideas came from ELCID and from our communications and from Mr. Thomas. So yeah, it takes a team.
Great. Anything further? No? Okay, so there's a recommendation that the Government Operations Committee forwards a recommendation to Council that Council confirms the District of Clearwater has held sufficient public consultation on the 2023 to 2027 financial
Move the
plan.
recommendation. So rarely get to do that.
I'll second.
Councillor, excuse me, Matheson. All those in favor? Great. So then we'll move on to the Director of Finance presentation for the financial plan.
Thank you, Chair Frizzle. We have a presentation. The purpose of the presentation is to provide the financial plan updates that have occurred since the last time it was brought to Council in February, and to receive the final direction from Council before the financial plan bylaw is brought forward. Oh, can I? So the resolution in front of Council, I'm just going to read it so you keep it in your mind as I go through the presentation. That the Government Operations Committee recommends to Council that staff commence preparing the 2023-2027 financial plan based on a revenue generated from taxation at 7% over 2022. And that capital and special operating projects will be included as amended by council, and that Government Operations Committee recommend to council that no further changes to the 2023-2027 financial plan bylaw except those identified in this council meeting and further to March 21, 2023 in-camera recommendations. So in the agenda today in the presentation, we'll talk about the financial plan updates. We'll talk about some financial highlights, impacts on residents, the big picture, next steps, and the resolution. So the District of Clearwater has gone through the process from developing business cases and service level changes all the way through all those colored boxes to, we're now between bringing the public engagement responses in the pink box and the blue box and the green box. So that's where we are right now. It is important to remember that the community charter says that we must adopt the financial plan bylaw before May 15th. So because May 15th is on a Monday, we have to adopt it by the Friday and file it by the Friday the 12th of May. So, and that has to be, and it has to be adopted before the tax bylaw. So there's a process here, and with all the meetings that are the council meetings that are scheduled, we need to follow through and just move through the process. So just to talk about the next two slides, we'll talk about some of the updates that have been implemented in the financial plan. So on the left side is the capital project updates, and then on the right side is the special project updates. On the capital side, there has been a reduction of $2.3 million. And part of those, I'll just go through it, and there's three categories. You see the council resolution, housekeeping, and grants not awarded. So I'm just going to go through those. The council resolution, there was a council resolution to increase the visual project by $4,000. Then there was some housekeeping. We had to adjust some of the carry forward projects. As we go through the year end, we realized that our estimates had to be adjusted. In total, they were adjusted down by $7,000. We also have some more information related to the funding on the generator project. We actually increased the grant from $30,000 to $102,000. So then the surplus was reduced. The surplus funding was reduced, and that was as well with the well 3 generators as well. So the generators, we had some more information and adjusted the funding. And grants not awarded. Recently, we found out that the siphon grant has not been awarded to the District of Clearwater, and the grant for the accessibility project for $90,000 has not been awarded. So we decided to take those out of the capital plan. On the special project side, we were awarded some grants. The one grant we were awarded for from the Strategic Priorities Fund was an integrated stormwater management plan. That was in our 2024 financial plan, so we brought it forward to 2023 for $111,000. And we spoke about new legislation regarding accessibility. So staff has requested to put in a project for accessibility plan development for $50,000 and just funding it through the general reserve. One thing noted here is we do not have a design for the siphon. If council chooses to put that design into the special projects, because I'm guessing it's going to be more than $10,000, we should add that into the financial plan, if council wishes to do that. Okay. This slide talks about some of the changes for the operations, so it's not on the project side. The slide here shows the black lines impact the property revenue generated from property taxes, and all the blue lines are moving money around or adjusting or housekeeping. So the first, we had a council resolution to increase the taxation to allocate $100,000 to the roads reserve. And we've done that. And we've also removed, there was a service level change request and that was denied, so we removed that for a net impact of about $55,000 additional to taxation. Then there was a increase in the grant and aid by about $3,000. That was for the minor hockey. So we increased that grant amount and took it out of the council contingency. So there was no impact to the property tax revenue. Housekeeping portions, we talked about earlier today, the transfer for adult education, and that's just a transfer from surplus to the reserve. The second item there, we adjusted donations and corresponding contribution of grants to realistic levels. What that means is, what I was seeing was that we would put $1 million in for a donation from a third party, and we would distribute $1 million for grants through the District of Clearwater. However, it's not reasonable for the district to assume that you will receive $1 million every year. So I did not put the donation in 2023, and I put a reasonable amount for grant distribution in that fund. Also, then I adjusted the amortization to a more realistic level. I went through the calculation, you know, as we prepare the year end, we're going through the calculations, and I thought it would just adjust it down to a more realistic level of, And then the district will receive a new Growing Communities Fund. I've added that in to the financial plan, and I allocated the full amount to a general reserve. So those are the updates since the last time we met and talked about the financial plan.
Are there any questions?
Oh, wait.
Oh, sorry.
Lots
Oh,
more.
I thought you were signing off, it sounded like.
Well, if you're ready.
No.
All right, so some highlights. Capital projects are now at $2.0 million. Special projects at $1.8 million. Grant funding for capital projects is down to 27%. It was closer to 63% with the siphon, so now it's down to 27%. Net impact to reserves and surplus is a net decrease of $100,000. So all the projects we've taken money from reserve, we've also put money into reserve, so the net impact is a decrease of $100,000. We repaid debt about $89,000, and non-market change in utilities contributes to the tax burden. So that is a highlight. We'll talk about that in a little bit. If you look at this, this is our new pie of all the capital projects that we have, and you can see that it's pretty consistent. It's pretty even. I mean, there's some bigger pieces and some smaller pieces, but there's not one area in the district that is getting all the capital money. One thing you do notice is that there is the DLCC building itself has a large portion. It's over $500,000 that we're investing into the building here, putting in air conditioners, air handlers, and a generator, EOC generator. And that's all allocating in there. The Sportsplex also is getting a new roof. What else is with the Sportsplex? And dehumidifiers. In the parks, we're just finishing up a lot of the trails in the parks, and the big project there in the parks is the Clearwater River Trail We're going to complete that this year. And in Public Works is the roads program for $300,000 in 2023, and a Public Works expansion, yard expansion for $43,000. And this is the funding for the capital projects that we have underway. Grants is about 27%, reserves is about 58%, and surplus is 14%. Yeah, taxation, generally we have, it's just very small, $10,000. So this is our operating budget with one-time projects. So this is a graph that shows a relationship between what the district takes in as revenue and what it disperses as expenditures. And it separates the one-time costs, which is your one-time special projects that are over $10,000 and don't really have a tangible asset. So it's like your studies and your reviews and your strategic plan. It's those kind of things. So for the area to the left of that blue vertical line, those are things revenue coming in to the District of Clearwater. So $3.2 million in property taxes, and it includes parcel taxes and grants in lieu as well. Sales, the orange portion is sales of service, which includes septage, utility payments for water and sewer, NTSP fees, recreation fees, ICBC, a motor vehicle, and other items like that. The green item is 3.1, includes government transfers, kind of like the TNRD transfers, gas tax, small communities grants, the new Growing Communities Fund grant, and climate action. And the other revenue represents interest and penalties and things like that that the district collects. To the right of the blue line, you'll see the one-time projects, $1.8 million. It's also on your large 8x11 sheet. And then each of the departments and the values for each of the departments, and the bottom part of it, you see $1.4 million in savings. That includes surpluses and reserves. So we put money into reserves. And this slide represents the changes to your reserves and surplus. So we have seen this slide before, and it looked quite different. The blue line is additions, net additions to the reserves, and the orange line are taking money out of reserves and surpluses. It really demonstrates the movement between surpluses and reserves. After funding all the projects and operations, the total impact of all those funding of all those projects is only $100,000 decrease. And as we move through the year-end process, we're refining our balances to the reserves. At this time, I can easily calculate the changes. I'm not definitive on the exact balance at this time. So we're working through that. Probably in a month, it'll be just perfect. Just talking a little bit about property taxes, and before I go too far into property taxes, we still are working with our first draft of property taxes. We haven't got our final draft yet. Their deadline is April 7th. It could be next week.
Is that BC assessment final?
Yeah, BC assessment. So we're still waiting for them. However, these slides still apply. In 2022, you can see the property tax notices when they go out. They have several different government agencies on them, and the green section there is the District of Clearwater municipal portion. Is about 58% of total taxes paid. And of that 58%, we break it down to the different classes. So we have the residential classes, the utility class, and the business class. And the significance to this is that if one of those pie pieces were to increase, it shifts some of that tax burden to the other pieces of the pie. So when I talk about non-market change, that means that there's roll numbers or assets coming onto our roll, which shifts that pie. If I talk about market change, it just means that the value of that current property just went up. So it's not actual units, it's just values going up. Yes?
So hypothetically, we have a very large pipeline coming online in stages. That will affect our utilities portion of that pie?
Yes.
Okay, just for clarification to the room.
Yeah. So where are we with other communities compared to other communities of our size, some between 1,900 and 3,000 in population? You'll see there that the far left, I guess, is 100 Mile, House, Chase, Chetwynd, and then the yellow is Clearwater. In our tax values for 2022, no, these are 22. And you can see that the average is the green line. So just in the bars, if you're looking at the bars, we're about average of other communities about our size around our area. And then we also looked at the orange trend line. That is what those residents pay for the municipal tax. And the average municipal tax for those communities was $1,202, and Clearwater was $1,291. So very close, $89 different. So it's just to show and demonstrate that we're not really that far outliers. We're not an outlying community. And this slide provides you with some historical changes as it compares to the consumer price index. So if we were to look at the blue bars in the slide are the percentage changes in property taxes from one year to the other. So percentage change doesn't necessarily mean my property tax went up. It means that the revenue generated from property taxes went up. So for example, in 2022, the revenue generated from property taxes went up 2.9%. And I compare that to the CPI index just to get an understanding if it's reasonable or if it's too high or it's too low. And you can see it was like a 2.8. So in my thinking and reasoning, it's reasonable. For the 2023, the green line, we will see that the revenue generated from property taxes went up 7% over 2022. However, the CPI is up 6.9%. So it's, in my head, it's reasonable. So the completed roll assessment changes. That's what BC assessment calls the first roll. They call it a completed roll. We're waiting for the revised roll. We have assessment changes between residential is class 1, business is class 6, and utilities is class 2. You can see that residential went up 27.6% over last year. Utilities went up 35.9% over last year, and business other went up 13.8%. Now those percentage changes include market change and non-market change, so they include both.
Back to non-market and market change. Market changes increases in sales value, and
Yeah.
then non-market changes improvements or new
Yes.
construction. Just to clarify for the audience.
Yes. And exactly, so when the District of Clearwater reviews the impacts to the residents, we look at 4 different properties that we've picked. We picked 2 Class 1 properties and 2 Class 6 properties. And these are the impacts to those properties. And I'm just going to go through them because it's kind of hard to see. For the first Class 1 property in 2022, they were $495,000. In 2023, they're $673,000, and the change is 36%. So this property is going to be higher than the average. So the impact will impact them more. In Class 1, the number 2 property goes from 816 to 866. It's only 6% change. So the impact's going to reflect less, and so on. Now, this is where we talk about, I think the fifth point on that slide there talks about Class 2 properties increasing 35.97%. It is made up of only 7.43% market, and most of that, 28.5%, is non-market change. And as you see, if you look on the left side in that box there, this is how the distribution of my calculations are. For 2022, the residential taxes were paying 54.82 of all the taxes percent. In 2023, in this draft financial plan, they were actually only paying 52.32. However, look at utilities, the Class 2. In 2022, they paid 21.02, and they've now in the draft financial plan will pay 26.9%. So they've increased that pie piece, and it's reduced the residential piece of the tax burden. And just moving down to Class 6, business and other, in 2022, they paid 23.89%. In 2023, they actually pay only 20.53%. Now, this is just an opportunity for perhaps a conversation, maybe not for today, but in some time future when we talk about financial policy or financial guidelines. When it comes to non-market change, some communities may think, well, let's put that aside and put it into an infrastructure reserve and not hit the tax burden. So currently I'm hitting the tax burden, but perhaps in sometime in the future, council may decide as a policy to put it into an infrastructure reserve or some kind of reserve for the future, because there's more people, you need more infrastructure, you need more reserves to help build that infrastructure or replace that infrastructure. So the revenue generated from taxation in the financial plan for 2023 is $3 million versus in 2022 was $2.8 million. So in that slide, in that table, you see the 4 properties there. You'll see the values between the 2 years. You see the percentage change. And then just to the left of the green bar, that was your 2022 tax burden. And then in 2023, the draft plan is, I'm going to read them out because they're so small. So the first example there went from 1,813 to 1,971. But remember, they had 36% increase in their assessment. The second one there went from 2,988 and went down to 2,535. And I'm going to show this actually in a graph, and it's probably a lot easier to see. But the other impact also is on those 3 columns to your right, if council chose to increase revenue from taxation further, the 1% is the impact and the 2.5%. So to demonstrate, if council decides to increase revenue from taxation by another 2.5%, homeowner one will increase $69, for example. And the additional revenue will be about $71,000 for the district of Clearwater. So the council may decide to do that as well. 1% in taxation is about $30,000. So these are our 4 houses, or 4 properties, not necessarily houses. The orange and the gray are the residential properties that we were looking at, and the yellow and the blue were the business properties we were looking at. The second residential property will actually go down about $450, and the business other, the yellow one, will actually go down about $300, and the class 6, the blue one, will actually go up by $450. And for each increase, that's the impact of it. So that's the taxation piece. Just to bring it all together, capital projects are about $2 million, mostly funded through reserves and grants. Taxation over, or tax revenue over 2022 is 7%. We will pay down debt, $89,000. Net reserves and surplus drawn down by about $100,000. What is our next steps is to draft the financial plan bylaw, draft the tax rate bylaw, do the legislative reporting, and also prepare the internal reporting, have the reports up on our website, and start the process again.
You get a weekend off?
And the resolution is in front of you, which we talked about earlier.
So, wow, that was a lot of information. Good information. Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Councillor Sim.
So in terms of the meet and, first of all, I think when the mayor and we first started, I think 1% tax was $15,000.
12 or 15, it was fairly low.
It was really low. So it was really interesting. And then the second note is that my sister lives in Vancouver, and she gets installments for about $12,000 per quarter for her property taxes. So, yeah. So it's always really interesting to come this time of year. What I want to know is in terms of the meat and potatoes, because the actual percentages in that make a lot of sense. Some of my questions relate to the new mobility plan. I'm not 100% sold that that's something to include here, because we've got some past work that's been done. So to look at that. And I'm also wondering where we've captured some of the public feedback that we received.
I have no direction from council to bring that into the financial plan. If council wishes to bring that forward,
this is the
I'm
time
looking for it. Yep.
Okay, great. So some of the things that I noted from the public feedback, is I'm sure that we all did, there was lots of discussion around Dutch Lake Beach and the parking there, 37 East. There was a number of items relating to the curling rink. The ice jet was there. I think that when we had asked about the humidifiers, I believe that the answer was that the humidifiers had been replaced in the curling rink last year. I noticed that we don't have our parks manager here, but I thought that's what I had been told, but maybe I wanted to clarify.
We would have to take that back and verify it.
Okay. So was mindful of that. I also noticed that there was some requests for some upgrades for some of the tables. I don't know if that has to be factored into there. I've spent a lot of time in the lounge over the past 4 days. I see the reason for that request. Makes sense there. But I think that in terms of, so just looking at how that's done, we do go out to the public, and now what do we do with it? I was also interested in the communication piece was mentioned a few times, and I was really heartened by the fact that people want to hear from us more I thought that was a great piece. And there was also some notations that mindful that the paper documents are equally important to our citizens because not everybody relies on social media. So I thought that was a good comment, how we factor that in. The big ones for me are the mobility study. Is it possible that we do that at $5,000 for a consultant? We do have the UNBC mobility project that we did a few years ago. I had shared that link. From what I understand from legislation, we just have to start a committee, so it's a soft launch, and it does say that we can use past reports and to formulate that. The intent of the legislation is not to duplicate work, so even the diversity, equity, and inclusion, there could be a part of that group that could address those items as long as half of the group or the discussion points have some accessibility aspects to what they bring. Sounded complicated. Could we do that for $5,000? Could we then allocate the $10,000 to the siphon?
Go ahead, Mr. Thomas.
My comment is I believe the provincial legislation requires at least representation from people with accessibility needs on the committee itself.
Yeah.
So attaching an accessibility plan to the DEI working group will result in changing the composition of that group and will have consequential impacts to the functioning of that group as well. So Council, please be mindful of that. Secondly, the 2012 report is a good foundation for the District of Clearwater, and as I understand it from my discussions, it has led to accessibility parking lots in DLCC, as well as at BILO, as I understood it from former CAO. That being said, it is a 10-year plan and will require a review to see if it's still a viable plan for the District of Clearwater currently and going forward. And whether or not it's done in-house or a third-party consultant, that's up to Council to decide.
Councillor Herring?
Yeah, so the piece with the 10,000 for the siphon project, can you explain that a bit more? Like, I missed that. So you were saying that we haven't budgeted for a component of the siphon project?
No.
No. Okay.
So we've removed the total siphon project, and we were waiting on the conversation we had earlier about shovel-ready projects, and I believe Mr. Thomas would like to add a few words.
Your thoughts?
Oh, and if council so chooses to make the siphon a shovel-ready project, we need to put funds against that, and we haven't done that in the numbers that I've presented.
Okay, I'd like to see that reflected in the numbers. Personally, I'd like to move that to shovel-ready.
Yeah.
Just to add to what Director Klassen had mentioned, the discussion about shovel-ready relative to the siphon project is perfect because the 2.2 million put in the budget was a Class D estimate, and we put the grant forward with the hope that if we got the funding, we will develop the budgets and the project further along. But since we didn't get the grant, we have no money set aside to develop the project to be shovel-ready.
Councillor Sim?
So noting that, but with that 1.5 million, we could also access that. That would be a use that could be from that fund.
That's correct. The goal is to bring forward the letter we received. We received the letter quite late in time for this package, to read it, understand it, and prepare for council. So that letter will be brought forward on April 4th, and I believe it's Infrastructure Committee, which is perfect. And
I think that's the 21st.
That's today.
It'll be brought forward in April.
Yeah.
Okay, anything further? Yeah, Councillor Sim?
Yeah, so I mean, it's nice to talk about these things, but I would like to land on whether or not council wants to include $50,000 for a mobility study.
Mayor Blackwell?
Mr. Thomas, from what we've seen so far, do we have any indication what the province is going to require of us? I know this is still under it's on its way. Do we know what kind? I'm thinking in terms of the last one we did, which was the housing study. Is the expectation that this is going to require a similar cost to that? Is there any idea out there?
At this time, I don't have a robust answer for you, Mr. Mayor. I suggest that the report in April that's going to come forward is going to lay out the legislation, regulation, the direction of the province, and provide council with an update as to where the District of Clearwater stands, from which council can decide to move forward or not, how to move forward.
Councillor Sim?
So according to the UBCM, which directs us to the Ministry of Social Development, they said that an accessibility plan should outline how the organization will identify, remove, and prevent barriers to people in the organization or interacting with it. The plan must be reviewed and updated at least once every 3 years. And at this point in time, they say that there is no requirement to submit the accessibility plans to the government. So with that, it seemed that a lower amount, and I appreciate the fact that, you know, having a higher caliber report protects us. So I really appreciate that mindfulness. Because their bar is a little low right now, when we've got something on the books that seems workable, a $5,000 for a consultant to come in, I lean a little closer to that.
Or Blackwell?
Yeah, you know, as somebody who was part of the 2012 plan, that plan was great.
It's great.
But it's a 2012 plan. It's 11 years ago. And I don't even know if we're in the same playing field with what was addressed in that plan. Though I do hear you, you know, somewhere in the middle is perfectly fine to land a $20,000 placeholder on that, and then allocate money towards a shovel-ready, more shovel-ready plan for the siphon is perfectly fine with me.
Yeah, I thought that a lot of the long-term plans that were in that mobility study were actually pretty relevant. It was actually kind of sad to see how little has actually changed in Clearwater and how much the Trails Committee has actually done to help us further those plans. I found that interesting. The other one is just, is there consideration for, you know, some of the requests by the curling club? It sounds like we might have to take that back to the parks manager to get some feedback on that and some numbers.
Blackwell?
It's a little late in the budget process. That said, I mean, the de-icer or the chlorine remover ice jet is not a very large expense. I think that's easily something that we could get out of a grant request from sports rec type grant. It's just never been actually presented to us.
No, it hasn't. It just came out of the feedback.
Sorry, there's a lot of costs that have come up from the curling club over the years, but they never actually present formal numbers to us or formal requests to us in that sense. So I think it's worth a good conversation with them, and I think community forest grants and things like that would be a great place for them to apply for these things, because it's exactly the kind of stuff that the community forest covers. But as far as including it in the budget at this particular point, I mean, we're days away from having to make finalized discussion. The larger thing about the accessibility grant and that sort of thing, I'll take your point to that, because maybe we are getting the cart a little bit ahead of the horse on that for the scale of that. But this other side of that is maybe we need to get another horse in front of the cart to deal with the siphon project. So there is a bit of a balancing act, but I really wish we'd had this conversation a month and a half ago or a month ago.
Well, again, but that just comes back from, you know, what we asked for, which was community feedback. And, you know, is that something that, you know, how do we factor that in for that facility? I think the point about the grants, I don't know how any of that works. The other one, because as you've said, Director Klassen, this is the time, you know, to put these requests in. Some of my other questions were, so we've got $300,000 for roads, is that correct?
That is correct.
So an extra 2% would be 71,000 that could go to our roads. I just, for reflection.
So that would be 9% over 2022.
And then some of the other things is the council has talked about some promotional items. We've talked about for our events and needing to replace things, like our barbecue, for example. That's been raised before. Is that something that needs to go in a budget, or do we have another budget like under events? Because I think we have money in there, or no?
Well, I don't typically go down to barbecue levels.
Yeah, I know, I know, but I always get
But
caught on it
council
6
does-
months later, so, you know, here it is, on the
council-
record and being recorded.
Now is the time
Yeah,
to
so
earmark.
we do have council contingency if that is
Okay. Yep, good
a
point.
urgent item that we can't find money for. Yeah, but I'm really interested in hearing where we're going to land with a mobility study, if it's $25,000, or what dollars we're going to use for the siphon project and how much. Maybe I can ask Mr. Thomas about how much it would cost for the siphon engineering.
Go ahead, Mayor Blackwell.
I think it'd be worth suggesting that we give staff 5 minutes and take a 5-minute recess. You'll have to call that though, just to.
I call a 5-minute recess for the Government Operations Standing Committee.
Back at 8:35.
Back at 8:35. I didn't even know what time it was. Jeez. like to bring the Government Operations Standing Committee back into session. Where were we at? Councillor Herring, were you asking a question? No, you got. Councillor Sim.
So where in the budget have we allocated for the Dutch Lake beach parking? I know that we had discussed it in a meeting, and then it was going to be brought back because staff was looking for direction.
So, if I may.
You go ahead.
I mean, we discussed things, but I don't think we ever actually asked staff to put a plan forward or do an engineering drawing or anything along those lines.
No, it was going to be discussed and then brought back, but I'm just wondering how we proceed on something like that.
Strat planning?
That depends on what council wants to do. If council, when we say Dutch Lake beach parking, are we talking about the lines drawn on the paved surface, or are we talking
yes,
dirt area, the paved surface? Okay. What does council want us to do with that? Replace what was there or do a completely different design?
we had talked about working in conjunction with 37 East, and so maybe what we could do is table that discussion because we've got some revised plans coming back. Would that satisfy?
But just to clarify, and that's not my meeting, it's your meeting.
I know, but you go ahead and clarify.
We're now talking about if we are discussing 37 East plans, then that's a plan coming forward at a future date, and we've already put that in motion. It doesn't necessarily mean we need to budget for any of that right now in this meeting because we don't know what we're budgeting for. But we do have the Trans Mountain Benefits Fund that we could quite easily, if we incorporate this into 37 East, is incorporate that line repainting, if that is the decision of council. That's the decision and direction that we give staff at a future meeting, because we kind of really can't at this meeting. We're not in the right meeting.
Not in the right meeting.
If that's what we give staff direction to do, then that's what we give staff direction to do, is to incorporate it into the 37 East design. But we didn't do that in so many words at the last meeting when we broke 37 East into 3 projects.
No, we did it 3 meetings ago where we talked about doing a coordinated plan. Anyway, I think that we can do it. We can address it at infrastructure. Is that what you're suggesting? That we're a better place?
I would think that's where it should be sitting right now. It's an infrastructure discussion.
Right. I was just looking to see if there was anything in the budget. Sounds like no was the answer at this point because there's been no direction from council.
That's correct.
Okay.
I would like to flag, if council intends on doing substantive planning exercises for the rest of this year, which would be appropriate for fiscal year 2024 and to 2028, it would be important to earmark a specified amount without having specific projects assigned at this time, because later on you'd have to draw down. The alternative is, as council identifies projects and the cost of those projects are clearer, you would have to amend the budget in order to fund it, which is the same concept for the accessibility program.
Just to clarify that, we would have to draw funds out of something else we're doing in order to pay for it.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Okay.
So setting aside a 50, 100, whatever, for future plans is one thing.
So if we were to take the accessibility assignment right now of $50,000 and put it into a generic future planning pot, is that something that would be appropriate? Therefore, we could draw out the amount that, once we know what the government's plan is, we could draw that potentially out of there. We could also draw potentially, if it does not fit into the 37 East redesign criteria, that we could draw out of that for the planning.
That's correct.
Okay. I like that idea.
I think you're brilliant. You've
so
answered it.
Do we have sort of an option here?
Yeah.
Because at this particular point in the budget plan, we know we have these things coming forward, but we don't know specifics enough on them to tag money to them, and fully realizing that we may be pulling out of other pots, because all of these things combined, once the rubber hits the road on them, accessibility, the redesign of line painting or whatever it happens to be in front of Dutch Lake, could exceed all of that, could exceed that by double or triple. So we will probably be modifying the budget.
It could be the first thing on our accessibility plan.
Okay.
I would like to answer one question that was asked prior to recess, Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
The question was approximately what sum of money would be required for the engineering of the siphon from Class D to Class B. In speaking with the engineers right now, that's approximately $100,000. And it's that value because of the scale of the project and also because of the technical complexity, geotechnical research and verification that needs to be done for traversing the hill behind the fire department.
So further to that, I mean, at this particular point, assigning $100,000 in budget is going to cause a 2.5% or 3% tax increase if we were to do it today. So other options would be borrowing for that, or pulling it out of reserves, or...
So the district did receive $1.5 million for infrastructure. That would be one opportunity. The other ways is to do general surplus, or eventually, if it's tied to a specific reserve account, whether it's water, sewer, roads, it could be pulled from those sources, or taxation, or grants, or debt.
So we do, just to clarify, we have multiple sources of income other than the actual budget to pull the needs for this once we actually identify a solid cost on this, because once again, we're talking about a cost that we don't have a solid cost on. We're making essentially a Class D estimate on the estimate to do an engineering job. So the irony of that is not lost on me in this particular moment. So thankfully, because of the 1.52 million and other sources, we have options, whereas many towns our size would be looking at borrowing or increased taxation on this one. Thank you.
Councillor Sim.
We have $40,000 in the budget still for the sound system at the Sportsplex. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Is it possible that that $40,000, similar to what the mayor has just suggested, becomes a $40,000 for upgrades? So if it turns out that the sound system doesn't have to be, we've heard from the curling club as well as the hockey arena shares that lounge area up there, that some of those upgrades could be used with that funding. So it's just not as strident.
I would recommend that then council cancels the business case associated with the what's it called again? The speaker, the sound system upgrades, because we really do not want to find ourselves in a situation where council provided previous direction to do a sound system, and then later on it's unclear how that money is going to be spent. So either stick with the approval of the business case that council did, or cancel the approval and put it generally speaking.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
There's a capital project there, so that the sound system is a tangible asset. If we're not going to make it a tangible asset, we're going to do a study, that's just an operations kind of thing, right? So the funding is, how do we fund that project is impacted. Because some of your reserves are capital in nature, not operating. So if you move it into an operating, it's a study, then it's a different funding package.
Right. So, and from what I understand, the sound system is working. It's been working all week. It's been indicated that, it needs to be tweaked. Does it need $40,000? Maybe not. Again, going back to the public feedback and some of the requests from a different user group, that they have some needs. So we've got $40,000 that have been allocated there. Do we need to do a different business case, or how do we address that for our citizens?
Mayor Blackwell.
Yeah, I mean, it's working this week, but it wasn't 3 weeks ago. So go ahead, go ahead if you have comment.
Yeah, and just to speak on this, the issue with the sound system, I did speak with both Roger and as well as the AV tech he was discussing, and there was rust found in the speaker drivers due to humidity issues over the summer. So there is physical, repairs that need to be made to those speakers, or you could find ourselves without any sound system in there.
Go ahead. Councillor Broughton.
Just because Roger's not here, but that sound system worked to skating festivals ago. So it was the same sound system that we just used at the last one, and it was fantastic, and we didn't have any issues. And if it's still working for a whole week, I'm guessing it's doing okay without Roger's knowledge with us. I don't know. But I really like this idea of $40,000 put into a fund that we could put upgrades depending on user group needs.
Councillor Harry.
So in terms of where we are in the budgeting process, are we a little late to be making decisions on business cases? I thought we made those decisions some time ago. So I just feel like if that's a priority, like I'm not saying we ignore the public feedback about the curling rink. I'm saying we've received this feedback now. We've already made our decision on the business case. To pull a business case and ask for a new business case at this state in the budget seems like it's going to create a delay on what's already a super tight timeline to get this done by May the 12th, right? Based on how many council meetings we have. It seems like the wrong time to introduce this.
Mayor Blackwell.
I'm going to agree with that, and I think the public advice is great. I mean, we're not going to ignore the public advice. We accepted it as part of this process, but this is an ongoing process. As stated, this all starts again in a couple of months. The day after we pass it, we start again. I think the District of Clearwater is actually in relatively financial health state. I don't want to second guess Mr. Mayor's assessment or a professional sound engineer's assessment of the system. It may have worked for the last couple of weeks, but our system worked here until it didn't. And if they found evidence that it has rust, is failing and things like that, I mean, the plan has been made, the business case has been made. The wishes and desires of the curling club and everything else, with some of I mean, we've never actually taken in as much money as we have in the last little while, whether it be from septage receiving, whether it be from the $1.52 million. There is a lot of money that we have taken in recently that has very few restrictions that we know of at this point. I think we can solve a lot of these problems by doing future budget amendments when we actually know what we're dealing with, what the actual costs on some of these small things are, whether it be the dechlorinator for the Jedi system for the curling club. But right now, in the same way that we're playing around with the lack of clear understanding as to the accessibility study or what the province's requirements are going to be for us, we're doing the same thing with equipment and stuff. We've heard the need, and we've heard the need through the process, but how much are we assigning to that at this particular point? And I agree with Councillor Herring, we're late in the game to be doing that. Not saying that we're not going to fund it or do it in the next year. I just don't think we're going to fund it in this budget discussion. I think we can fund it outside of this budget discussion once we actually have an understanding of what we're doing.
Councillor Sim.
As always, very sage words. I think for me, what I would need in the next time we go through the budget is the time where council says this is your time to robustly debate, because that's what I lost in this. Is it was bringing forward information, it was it, but it didn't feel like now we debate. Like, where do you want to see it? Because things kept coming. We've had a number of amendments, and that's all I share is that was that tonight, and it appears that we've done it.
And I agree with you, and I think this council, or versions of this council over the last 8-10 years, have made multiple attempts to start the budgeting process earlier so that we had more time to breathe and discuss. And this particular council has made some very important decisions. One is new accounting software, which will help us get ahead of the curve, experiencing the same thing at the TNRD, the same discussion, 130 spreadsheets, the simplification, the ease to adjust budget as we go, the ease to adjust business cases, financial planning, and all that sort of thing almost on the fly. We still need that core inputted information, and staff, even tonight has done a wonderful job of scrambling to try to get estimates for that, and I really do appreciate that. But we're talking about asking for estimates of people at 8 o'clock on a night, which brings back to another thing. Can we go back to daytime meetings? Anyways, or a different hybrid, or the working groups as suggested in the thing here, so that we can flesh some of this stuff on a more timely basis. But I think as a community, we actually are in a fairly healthy financial shape. More so than a lot of the crisis years that I've been through in the last 11 years of this council. I think we have the ability to keep rolling despite not actually assigning dollars to this on some of these actually relatively small purchases that could affect things. And we're going to have discussions with community partners like Community Forests in the next few weeks. I think it should be brought to the table. Also, anything to do with Sportsplex is 40-60 split with the TNRD. So it is a more complex issue than just making a decision right now. Thank you.
Councillor Sim.
My final question is, how much is in council contingency? Is it 54,000, 55?
Yeah, something.
Don't look. I'm sure it's up there.
It's right around there.
Okay,
53
thank you.
maybe. I wanted to make one comment. Is if council in the previous financial plan bylaw, council has identified each of the projects that we talk about during the financial plan. If I remove those projects out of the bylaw, it allows us to maybe do substitutions or reallocate priorities or whatever happens during the year, and I don't have to bring the bylaw forward again. Would council consider that if it's not in the community charter to do that? That might answer the question about, let's say the audio is only $20,000 and it's upgraded for $20,000. Maybe it'll allow some money for another project just to. I'm not suggesting we do that without council's knowledge for sure, but.
I think that it's a really good idea, because I think that same premise could apply to the OCP, because we've got, an estimate in there, but we haven't seen any, quotes that come in. So your suggestion would actually allow some flexibility. And yet, I stand with the amounts that we've got. Like, I stand with everything that's been presented. It's just the tweaking of how it's done. Mm-hmm. So your suggestion seems like a reasonable one for me, but I can't speak for everybody else.
Anybody have anything?
Just where did we land?
Yeah.
With the 7%.
This is Earth, but other than that, I'm not quite sure. 7% continues to go forward.
Yeah,
is that the agreement? Okay.
So the project that we had, the mobility study, or that is going to be called what? Pre-engineering study for $50,000, and we use it as we see fit.
Study fund, engineering and study fund.
Study fund, okay. The siphon project.
$100,000 is the estimate right now. Where would we allocate $100,000 out of?
Well, I think that with that, actually, Councillor Herring.
I thought we had talked about that coming from the 1.5 potentially. So
Potentially,
does
yeah.
that mean we need to budget for the 100,000, or does that mean that's one of those things that when we get that money, we apply that?
We should put it in the budget if infrastructure is on the list. So
it's your meeting, but you can make a motion.
You want to make
I move that we allocate $100,000 from the new communities, is that what it's called?
building communities.
Growing Communities Fund,
yeah.
towards the siphon project.
And I'll second that.
Councillor Herring. Any questions? All those in favor? Carried. All right. So moving on. Is there anything further? Councillor Sim.
Just to add to what Mayor Blackwell said, is I think that this budget also really addresses some of the infrastructure needs to this community as well, and I think that that's important. And I just wanted to share that out, that we're hitting a number of points, and the things I'm bringing up are the small nuances, you know, and that's it. But the bones is a good budget.
Yeah, those are the things that we can.
I just don't know where.
Yeah.
So next year, we'll do it different.
Yeah. Okay, so Ms. Clausen brought forward that recommendation. Do you want me to read it out to you? Or would someone like to move it?
I'll move the recommendation. I will second the recommendation.
Any further questions? Councillor Sim.
So Ms. Klassen, again, to your suggestion, would that allow your suggestion to move forward, or would it not?
What I can do is I can bring the bylaw the way we have done in the past, and the bylaw with the new format, and you can have a look at it, and council can decide at that moment how they want to move forward with the two draft bylaws.
Okay.
So although it will be different, I'll do the traditional or the bylaw we've had historically in the same format where it lists all the projects. And then I'll bring back with a different format without the projects, and council at that time can decide which one they would like to move forward with. Just so you can see the differences. Does that work?
Yeah.
Okay.
Any further questions? All those in favor? Carried. I would very much like to recommend that council rise from the committee of the whole. Someone like to move that? Seconder? All those in favor? It's all yours, Mayor Blackwell.
Oh, thanks. Thank you. So that was a great, in the end, that was a fantastic debate.
It really was.
You know, it was. I mean, it is. You know, but it does, to me, it does point out the fact that everything that council is doing, Ms. Klassen is doing, Mr. Thomas is doing, staff are doing, to move the budgeting process so that we start earlier, it's critical to getting this completely right in advance of setting taxation and setting the final budget. And I think if we have one thing that we do in the next calendar year of critical importance, it's that.
Yeah.
So that we do have time to breathe and think and contemplate and get a more fulsome, when we do get those suggestions from the public, to have the time to go get enough feedback to understand them. I have also had suggestions from the public on simple things like adding 2 pickleball courts to the tennis court conversion. But at the same time, without knowing the cost of that, the implications of that, and that sort of thing, it was something that I would bring to a council meeting after the budget proceeding, and then we do that. But I have, you know, there's many of these things that are on this list of a consultation that came in here. We've heard them. It's just a matter of, I like to say, listen to all requests at current, play the requests that make sense. Play the songs that make sense. So we have a budget. Draft financial plan 2023 recommendation that council receive the recommendations from the Government Operations Committee, and that council confirms the District of Clearwater has held sufficient public consultation for the 2023 to 2027 financial plan, and that council directs staff to commence preparing the 2023 to 2027 financial plan bylaw based on revenue generated from taxation at 7% over 2022, and that capital and special operating projects will be included as amended by council, and that council confirms that no further changes to the 2023 to 2027 financial plan bylaw except those identified in this council meeting and further March 21st, 2023 in camera recommendations. What is the desire of council on this? Moved by Councillor Frizzle, seconded by Councillor Matheson, further discussion. All those in favor? And that passes. Thank you. We are at 9 o'clock, so we still have time. I do, at this particular point, I will make a recommendation that we continue the meeting past, or that somebody needs to make a recommendation that we move the meeting past 9:30, because we will, and at this point, before that deadline arrives, We will be going into camera. We will exceed the 9:30 thing, and as a requirement, we need to set a motion that we are willing to go past 9:30. Okay, seconded by Councillor Herring. I'll write that one down fully next time so that I know the proper wording for it. It's come up very rarely, and it's generally something because of the things. All those in favor? Thank you. There are 3 correspondence items that do not require response, but there are information only. There is the snow level bulletin. Sorry.
EDO Wiley Bystad would like to just speak on 20.2.
20.2, okay. On 20.1, is there any comments or anything? Councillor Matheson, as a snow expert, looking at our North Thompson 91% of normal on this one?
I think we're up to 100% now with that snowfall we had through March.
So we're up to 100% now, so we're good. So this report's a little bit behind the times. Then Ms. Bystad, if you wish to speak on 20.2, and my understanding is you actually have an association with that group as well. Is that not correct?
That is totally correct, and so I do need to just point out that this is further information in my role as president of the BC Association of Farmers Markets and not as economic development officer of the District of Clearwater. What you have before you is a correspondence from BCFM that we send out annually to all participating communities within our nutrition coupon program. And wanted to point out that through this program, the farmers who attend the Clearwater Farmers Market made an additional over $14,000 through the redemption of the coupons that are provided to over 40 lower income residents. And so this obviously is a program that is dear to our hearts. It's good for the farmers and it's good for communities because it provides healthy local food to the people who really need it. Wanted to also sort of mention that provincially, this program hits over 10,000 households, over 27,000 total people living in those households. Provincially, we spend about $3.2 million in direct coupon revenue to farmers, and over 1,000 farmers are part of this program. So Clearwater in the Thompson Okanagan is part of 27 farmers markets that participate in this program with 178 farmers across the region. So this has been a real successful program for British Columbia. It is unique in Canada, and we are continually asked for information on how to export it to other countries. It is supported by the Ministry of Health, and Adrian Dix has been a huge supporter of this program for a number of years now. So thank you to Yellowhead Community Services for being the community partner with the farmers market to make sure that this program can be offered in Clearwater. Thank you.
Thank you. Comment, question, Councillor Frizzle?
I just wanted to say this project is near and dear to my heart. I've seen how this has benefited seniors especially. By using these coupons. And so I would like to make a recommendation that we write to the Minister of Health, Adrian Dix, to let him know how important this coupon program is to our community.
You have a question? Sir Bratton, you have a question?
Do we know how many farmers in our community that relates to? Because that'd be super cool.
Suppliers?
We actually do have that. I don't have that on hand,
okay.
But the Clearwater Farmers Market would have that information that they'd be able to pull.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know why I know this.
Let's see.
I don't know, right?
A couple of comments. One, though I am aware of the coupon program, what I really appreciate about it is it runs under the radar. Mm-hmm. So the people that are benefiting from it don't have to declare that. They don't stand out. It just happens. The farmers are grateful. There's actually the opportunity for many people to, sometimes the farmers markets coupons themselves actually migrate from farmers market to another, so people will show up at another farmers market and sometimes use them. I do know that occasionally happens. Yeah. The other thing is that there's that as a community, region, society, we need to have a larger discussion about food security. Yep. Down to the micro level, where we're talking about how we supply this community with food through farmers markets that benefit through programs like this, because we are losing farmers on a regular basis. And we need to start looking at that to take care of it, because food security, as we know from wildfires and everything else that we've been through, from highway closures and that sort of thing, it's not just about the days that there's emergencies, but it's also about accessibility to quality food, which this program offers, versus mac and cheese and everything else that comes with a budget, and the continued rise of grocery prices in this country. So I think that at some point in the future as a council, we should have a larger discussion about that. Councillor Matheson.
Just as a matter of interest, I don't know if anybody's followed some of the politics in Europe when it comes to food security and things over there, but in the Netherlands, the government was regulating a lot of farms and cutting back on things, and they were really killing them with regulations. So the farmers got together and started up a new political party called the Farmers Party. And out of the blue, the first election they were in, they are now the government. Oh. They run the party over there.
There you go. See?
There is power.
There is power. Okay. If there's no further on that, gumboots in Parliament. It sounds like awesome. Yeah. Go ahead.
Sorry. So Councillor Frizzle did make a moved recommendation. Would anyone
you
like to second it?
That's right. Did we get a seconder on that? We did not. So to write a letter to Adrian Dix expressing the importance of this program and its success. Seconded by Councillor Matheson. All those in favor? There we go. Thank you. 20.3 SEEMP, which I'm assuming is the Trans Mountain document that's in your package. A nice pictorial graph photo of the impact of Trans Mountain on our section. So there you go for that. No notices of motion. Questions from the public? Comments from the public? There's four of you. Okay, if you got nothing to say, thank you. We do need to move into in camera. There's a recommendation that the meeting be closed to the public pursuant to sections 91 AC, I, and L of the Community Charter to discuss matters relating to personal information about an identifiable individual who holds or is being considered for a position as an officer, employee, or agent of the municipality, or another position appointed by the municipality, labor relations, or other employee relations, the receipt and advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose, and discussions with municipal officers and employees respecting municipal objectives, measures, and progress reports for the purposes of preparing an annual report under Section 98. Can I get a mover and a seconder on that one, please? Moved by Councillor Frizzle, seconded by Councillor Matheson. All those in favor? That passes, and we will take a 10-minute recess. See you back at 9:20. Thank you.
Thank you, you guys.
Yeah, that's stuck in my head now.